Single agency, we've touched on quite a bit already. Single agency is where you only represent one party in the transaction. Kind of funny how they come up with that name, right? You represent a single person, single agency. That person could be a husband and wife, so it could be a group or an investor or a corporation. That's still single agency because you're only representing one side of the deal. That's where the single comes from, not necessarily the number of clients. So I could have two clients like Ashley and David, but it's still single agency because I'm only representing them as the seller. All right? So you typically only work, that's where we said a minute ago where you have client on my side, customer on that side. We have that other thing called a dual agency, which in Indiana is called limited. If you say dual agency to an agent here in Indiana, it's kind of like the word ain't. I know what you mean, I'll just think you're stupid. All right? So it's called limited agency. No, I won't do that. I will correct you. Do that all the time. People hate talking to me. Well, I'm the selling agent. Let's go over that again. Who are you? Oh, yeah, that's right. So there's a picture there of single agency where you've got an agent and a client. And then dual agency, which we call limited on 163. Now, here's the problem I have with limited agency. Go back to these two. Go back to our fiduciary responsibilities. How can I disclose everything I know about the deal, yet keep confidential information at the same time? Think about how hard that is. Limited agency, a lot of times people call that a me-me deal because I get both sides, me-me, right? If you do it on a small house, it's called a mini-me. No? So think about how hard that is. I, under the confidentiality rules, know my seller's lost his job and is motivated, and now I've got the buyer, but I cannot tell him that he lost his job and he's motivated because I have confidentiality to the seller, but yet I'm withholding something I know about the deal to the buyer. So see how difficult this could be? And I told you earlier, some states have outlawed limited agency for this exact reason. We have not yet. I don't know if we ever will. I know that there's a lot of rumbling amongst the active realtors that tend to not like it because of this. And of course, if it's you, you like it. Yeah, I love that. NAR says lawsuits jump up like 700%. Because, let's go through the scenario. Let's say Chavez has the seller and I have the buyer. I saw his client's name in the newspaper under the bankruptcy, or I don't know, let's do it not bankruptcy, that would terminate, for some other reason, divorce, or was involved in a lawsuit, or whatever. I would then have, under the disclosure obligations, hey, I think that client's hurting for money because I saw he was in a lawsuit. Let's lowball him on the house. Right? Wouldn't you do that? Yep. Right. Now let's change the scenario. Suppose it's my client as the listing agent that has that same issue that's in the court, and my buyer. I cannot any longer tell my buyer to lowball him because I saw his name in the court, because that's information he gave me that I have to protect. Or what's even worse, and here's where the lawsuits come in. What's even worse is, let's say the buyer saw his name in the newspaper without my advice, decides he wants to lowball him, so he gives him a very lowball offer. I take it back to the seller, and the first thing the seller says is what? You told him I was in a lawsuit. No, I didn't. He heard it. No, I think you told him. I'm now filing a violation against you. Now I have to defend myself and prove that it really wasn't me, it was this guy. That's why they jump up. Because anytime something goes wrong, guess who they're going to try and blame first? Me, because I have two sides of information. So limited agency is a very hard agency to maintain because of that. There's that one example that they call designated agency, right? What's the other word for that? In-house. In-house agency. In-house is where one of my guys are the buyer and one of my guys are the seller. That's not limited agency. And outhouse is different because that's shitty. That's like one of my favorite jokes. I don't know why. It's probably a bad joke. So that's called designated agency. Two different agents within the same broker are working on the same deal. The theory is I can separate the consciousness between the two agents. All right? If Maggie has got the seller and Brittany's got the buyer, they won't know each other's responsibility. So while it is technically both my clients, because I can separate them, it's not limited agency. Okay? On page, there was dual agency. Oh, you have to disclose dual agency. If you fail to disclose dual agency, it is actually the #1 violation right now of agents. You've got to disclose that. And here's the problem. Let me go back here on my video just so they can see it. Well, yep, I heard something.
When you say disclose, what do you mean disclose to both?
You have to disclose in writing to both parties and get their permission. All right? So typically, here's the scenario. You list the house and you got the sign in the yard. Buyer calls you and says, hey, I'm sitting in front of the house right now. Today's my day off. Can I see the property? And what do? Shoot over there, right? No, you don't. Because you got to call the seller first. Make sure it's okay that you can bring the buyer. You would call the seller and say, hey, there's a potential buyer sitting in your front yard. I want to show him the property. I will be his agent in this transaction. Is that okay with you? And they say, yes, it is. Okay, I need you to sign this form. And then when I show up on the front lawn with this buyer and say, hey, before I go in and show you this house, you know that I've got this house listed. Even though you called me, I still got to tell you that I've got it listed. Do you understand that? Is it okay that I'm also their agent and going to be yours? Is that okay? They say yes. Sign this form. So now you've got this form signed by the seller and the buyer. Now, let's go. All right? Yes. They have the right to say no. I have had one person say no. I was doing an investment for a guy. I've mentioned him once before, but I did a lot of his brokerage. He had a 12-unit apartment building, and buyer called me and said, I want to see that 12 units. So I said, okay, hold on. So I called John, and John said, I'd rather you not be his agent. You know all of my finances. You know all of my properties. I really don't feel comfortable with you representing the buyer and knowing all of my liabilities and assets and things like that. I said, I can appreciate that, John, so thank you. So I called another agent and said, hey, I need you to go show the buyer this property, and I'm going to charge you a referral to the other agent because it's my buyer. Technically, he called me. Well, in this particular case, it was one of my other agents, yes. It was one of my agents. I called and said, oh, and he's going to write an offer. So I'm handing you this buyer that's going to buy, all right? But they can say no, and if they say no, then you can't do it. You're supposed to get it done right before you show them anything, because a lot of people think you got to do it before you write the offer. No, technically it's too late, because you could have said something while you were showing the house that might have hindered their ability. Let me give you a stupid example, but it identifies my point. Suppose you're showing the buyer through your listing, and they go, oh, wow, he's a big game hunter. Oh, yeah, that's where they went on their safari after they won that $470 million lottery. Ding, ding, ding. The buyer's like, they don't need the money. You just might have given away some confidential information. So you're supposed to say it. You're supposed to get it signed before that, all right? The problem ends up being this. Here's what most agents will tell you. Buyer calls and says, I'm sitting in front of the house. I want to go see the property. You go, okay. I call my seller. He doesn't answer the phone. He's on vacation. He's working a job that won't let him have a phone. For whatever reason, you can't get a hold of him. I can't show you the property. Can you come back tomorrow? No, I'm off today. I'll tell you what, I'll just call another agent. So there is inherently a small problem in getting the signature signed. All right? Seeing you had a question? I thought somebody raised their hand up here. So you're supposed to get permission in writing from the person before you do it. All right?
I do have a question.
Okay, question.
So just in general, it's not, your buyer, but you have the other realtor to see if they can show the house. Do you have to call?
Okay, back up.
So just to show the house, do you have to call the seller every time?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, you get for every buyer. All right? So if it's buyer specific, is what I'm saying. Typically, if the seller has given you yes on buyer one, he's probably going to give you yes on buyer two. But you can't use the same form because that buyer one signed that form. Buyer two rolls along 2 hours later. I need another form with the new buyer's signature on it and the seller's again. All right?
If it's not your buyer, though.
Oh, if it's not my buyer?
The house is vacant. Can you just let anybody go look at it? It's not.
The answer to that would be hell no. And I don't think I understand. If it's not my buyer, how did they call me?
Well, does the other realtor call you?
Well, then, yeah, that's not my buyer. He would call me and say, how do I show your property? And I would say, okay, it's on a center lock. He's like, we're going tomorrow at 4. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so you wouldn't have to, they just have to ask you, you don't have to ask the buyer or the seller.
I think I'm having an aneurysm.
The owner of the house.
Yeah, no, I don't. That's not limited agency. I have already got permission to market the property when I created agency with the listing agreement. All right? And I told him, I said, we're going to market your property on the MLS. He's like, okay, I will allow you to put a lockbox on it while I'm at work, show the property. I'll keep it nice and clean and all that, so at any time you need somebody, just go in. Okay, you call me and say, you have a buyer that wants to see my listing. I skip. Okay, what's your name? What's your MyBore number? And when you going? Okay, it's on a central lock. Use your card to get in. Thank you. I'm out now. Now it's all to you. You show up at the house at 2 o'clock. You unlock the house with your buyer. You go through it. You look at it. You locked it, hopefully. Go back, sit at your office, and you call me up and go, hey, we're going to write an offer. Okay. But I've already got permission in the listing to do that showings. All right? And in your listing, and I don't want to get into the form, there are several questions that says, if I can't get a hold of the seller, what do I default to? Most of the time they put default to show it. Some of them say, well, I have a dog, so you need my permission because I have to run home real quick, put the dog in the cage because I'm not going to leave my dog in the cage all day. So you would say, okay, when do you want to see it? 4 o'clock? Hold on, let me call you back. Call my seller, and he's like, okay, I'll run home, put him in the cage, 4 o'clock. I call you back. I tell you, hey, there's a dog in the cage, but 4 o'clock's okay. All right? If I enter into a limited agency, cha-ching.
To do that, you have to get, and you're the listing agent, you have to get that person's permission before you get the other person's permission? Is there an order you gotta get?
There's no particular order, but you're supposed to get them both before you show the property. All right? So I guess theoretically you could show up at the front lawn, you called the seller, and he's like, I'm on my way home from the grocery store. Okay, so you show up and the buyer's standing there and you're like, hey, the seller's on his way, but sign this form. And you just kind of hang out. Seller pulls in and now he signs it. That's cool. There's no order but you have to get them both before you do anything.
So if I listed a property and somebody sees my sign and calls me and is like, I wanna see the house, can I just not mess with limited agency at all and just be like, okay, I'm gonna refer you
Yes.
to one of my other agents?
Yes.
Best thing to do.
Can you not mess with limited agency? Yes. You will see some of the bigger guys in this city. David Brenton's a great example, very great agent. He has a buyer specialist on his team. So he'll put a sign in the yard. Jeff Paxton's another one. Scott Veerkamp. These are all guys that do this for a living that are probably the top 3 or 4 in the city. You call them and they're going to go, hold on a second, don't say another word, and they hand it to a specialist that does nothing but buyers, and David feeds this buyer all these leads, all right? So, well, either that or he works in a team concept, but yeah, you can get a referral, all right? So yes, you can avoid limited agency all you want. When they call and go, hey, you know what, I don't want to deal with you, I'm going to, one of my partners, Holly's going to call you here in 5 minutes. Or just hold on, I'll transfer you to Holly. Holly's my buyer agent. She and I work together. I do all the listing, she does all the buying. So yes, you can do that. And a lot of the bigger guys, like I said, to avoid that potential conflict and lawsuits, have buyer agents that work on their team. Mark Dietl and Bruce Richardson, they have a buyer's agency, a buyer's agent. Yeah,
So then they're
in-house,
in-house,
which is not limited.
right, okay.
Yeah, they're in-house. One of my agents on the team will work with you. Todd Cook is another one that uses a buyer's agent. They have a designated person that does nothing but show properties and work with buyers. Todd does the listings.